So you're looking at the law of persons. We are pretty much done with issues to do with contracts now. So just coming back to some of the topics that we didn't look at, because I gave priority to contracts since business law, a bigger part of whatever it is that you're studying will revolve around contracts. And so that is the reason why we started with that one. Now, when it comes to issues to do with the law of persons, okay, most of this one just has to do with issues to do, like identity, okay, or personality, the whole thing of existence, like who are you, and does the law recognize who you are? In fact, for the most part, when you are looking at these, there are only two persons that you're going to be dealing with. So as far as the law is concerned, either someone is an artificial person or they are a natural person. Okay. So the legal personality is very important because you see, like if you're doing business, okay, think about it. Let's say, okay, let's take this guy called John here. And John owes 30, okay, he has 30 million, yeah, business account. And then John owes a debt. So basically, if we owe them, it's a debt. So they owe a debt of 27 million. And they owe that debt to a company called ABC Limited. So if you look at this scenario, I mean, well, you might say, yes, they can pay that. But the problem with this one is, so they pay and then they're left with what? So 3 million is nothing if you have 30. So, but if the company decides to go to court and they sue, then yeah, John has no choice. He has to pay that. Okay. But then if you flipped this script and say John, okay, has a business. So let's say John has a business called XYZ Limited. And he also has his personal account. So in the business account, which he owns, he has 30 million. In his account, he has 100 or even 10,000. And he still owes that company 27 million. What do you think is going to happen in this case? If the company goes to court, what happens?
John will be sued and he has to pay for that month.
Yeah, well, now he's going to pay, but where is the money going to come from?
Now, from the XYZ Limited, from this 30 million, because that from the personal account will not be sufficient to pay for the whole debt.
You see, is the problem. The problem is who owes this money? Is it John or is it this company? This debt, who owes them the debt? Is it John or is it the company?
John.
Yeah, see then, and as far as John is concerned, he only has 10,000.
10,000.
Yeah, so this one can't pay. And so John will be declared bankrupt. And people will say he's broke and he can't afford to pay. But at the end of the day, it's just him who can't afford to pay. He has a company that has money, so he'll still enjoy the life he has. Now he just avoided paying that debt. So what is the point here? The point here is that when it comes to the law, okay, understanding what qualifies or who qualifies as a person is very important. This is the difference between people who are properly rich. I mean, these are the reasons why, like, you watch these celebrities and they have money today, and then 3 years down the line, they are on their social media begging people to give them money. And you're thinking, what happened? And because there is, I mean, you can buy shoes. Okay, you can buy shoes 15,000. And someone else can buy shoes for 1,500. And you take pictures and people will think you're rich. But in reality, this person is just an idiot. Because this person who has these, they have taken that extra money and they're using it to do something. These shoes are yours. They're just your personal shoes. They're not going to generate any income for you. So it depends. That's the reason why you need to understand the difference between persons, especially from a legal point of view. So in this topic, we are looking at the way, okay, the law will understand the thing that makes the law identify a person and the various rights that these persons are going to have, okay, whether they're artificial or natural. And yeah, so that's the thing. Now, first of all, you need to understand that when you talk about a person, you're talking about an entity which is recognized by the law as having legal personality. That is, having certain attributes which are recognized by law. So meaning a person has certain rights. It is important. Those rights are like that thing for the business where you owe money, but then you don't have to pay because it's not you. So a person has certain rights. Like if I ask you right now, what are your rights? What are some of the things that you might consider to be your rights?
Right to life.
Hmm? Come again?
Right to life.
Okay, life. Is it life or right to live?
Both.
Because these are different things. Anything else? Anything else that qualifies as a right? So you only have that one.
No.
What else do you have?
Right to own property.
So there is the issue of property. Okay. Anything else? Pardon? Remember, these are also part of topic 2. Constitution, fundamental rights, and Bill of Rights and fundamental freedoms.
Right to education. Right to work.
So education has to be the basic, okay? Basic education. Because, and that is only, you only have that right because it's free. So a child, okay? A child of a billionaire, let's start with that one. And a child of like some poor person. They all have a right to basic education, which means if they attend a public school, then that's it. And this is just primary school. So if this kid is, I don't know, like how does the education system work? I mean, it's primary and then secondary, whatever, I don't know. But so the secondary part, which isn't free, so whether the dad is a billionaire or whatever, it doesn't matter. The kid can't say, my father must take me to school. It's like, no, that right just ends at basic education. Everything else after that is a favor. So this is as far as humans are concerned. But then if you look at companies, some of these things we are considering to be our rights are things that even companies can do. For example, can companies own property? Yes or no?
Yes.
So you see, some of these rights are going to to cross over. They're going to interlap. Yet a company is not a person. I mean, it's not a human being. Okay, it is a person, just isn't a human being.
Yes.
So that means, as far as the law is concerned, there has to be a distinction between these kinds of persons. There has to be a distinction between what is, I mean, they're all persons, but there's a natural one and there's an artificial one. And natural persons, in this case, we're talking about human beings. Because with artificial persons, we're talking about corporations. Now, once you understand this, it becomes easier to, navigate the whole thing. So any question up to that part? Any question?
Okay, I have this question. For the company, you have this other right to sue or to be sued. So like when the company is sued, it's the person, like those people that are under the board of management are the ones that are going to solve that case in court.
Are you using earphones or something? Can you like scream them inside because it's muffling? I can't hear you can't make out the words clearly. Innocent. Right. Okay. So
Okay,
yep, now you're good.
okay, I was saying like for the company, it also has a right to sue or to be sued, right to enter into contracts
Yeah.
under its own name. So when a company has committed, let's say, a crime, it's not that natural person that will go to court. See, there are those people that are doing the management that will be arrested.
Okay. First of all, a company cannot commit a crime. A company is not capable of committing a crime. Can you give me an example of what you think will amount to a crime in a company? Yeah.
Pollution, but I don't think it's a crime.
Well, that's a pollution. Even if you want to turn it into a crime, a company can't do that. The point is, I mean, we are still answering that question. You see, there is a crime, and then there is a civil.
Wrong.
A civil wrong, right? So, in order for
Yes.
in order for it to qualify as a crime, there has to be two things. This is just topic one, by the way. So, topic one, what was happening? You guys were in class, but you are busy eating. I don't know, what are you guys eating?
Nothing.
Mnakulaga nini when you're out of class? So you're probably just there munching crisps or popcorns. Well, I'm busy here talking. So anyway, in a crime, there are two things. There is the motive, okay? Or let's say there is the
Yes.
intent, let's call it the intention, and then there is the act itself. So mens rea and actus rea. So there's the intention and the motive, I mean the action. Now, while a company can commit an action, which is a contractual obligation, the company cannot have intent because a company is not capable of thinking. It is an artificial person. So human beings are the ones who are going to be thinking. So in that case, in case of a crime, then obviously it won't be the company, it will be the people who are running that company who did that. They just use the company. So let's say the CEO of ABC realizes that 123 Limited is about to launch a product. And then this CEO pays somebody to come here and burn something down here. They may burn down the company or whatever it is. You see, in that case, while the money came from the company's bank through the CEO to Mr. X who did that, the truth is it was this guy's idea. So the company can only get into a contract to do something, but the company can't do it. That is why it's called civil, wrong. Also, that is why most of what you study in business law is based on civil wrong. It's just complex. So yeah, when you talk about a company being in a position to sue or to be sued, yeah, they can go to court, but most of these are just going to be, they are suing under things like breach of contracts and things of that nature. Okay, like if torts, you say some negative thing about the company, so they are suing for defamation. But whenever there is an element of criminal liability, then we look at the human element in the company, the person who actually did that thing or paid for that thing to happen. Innocent?
Yes.
So that was that. Now, I don't know. I don't know. What was the question? Does that answer the question?
I was talking about the difference between the artificial person who will go to represent the natural and artificial person will go to represent that company in court in case they have committed that civil
Yeah,
wrong.
that's why companies will have their own lawyers. Okay, it's going to be because it's a company. They'll just hire a lawyer, and then the lawyer will be under the contract with the company, and they represent the company. But if it is a crime, then we look at the company and then say, okay, who in the company did this thing? Okay, so if a bus driver is speeding, but the bus company is just going to be fined because their workers are reckless. But if the driver hits someone, then the driver is the one who's going to go to jail. We will not say close down that company because the driver did hit someone. It's like, no, the driver is going to go to jail. The company just suffer a bad public image, but they're still going to be in existence. I mean, you do still buy things from companies that have had scandals. Like people still watch some of these mainstream media. Like when you're saying, I'm watching news on Citizen or GKTN or whatever it is. The first thing you need to understand is that whatever you're watching on TV is not even news. It has already happened. Okay, you're better off just looking at things in Twitter, but you still believe in them. So why? Because of the reputation. Okay. Right. So now let's start with natural persons. Unless there is a question. Is there any other question?
No.
So under natural persons, we are starting with minors. We're just interested. First of all, natural persons are basically humans. And we don't really care. There is nothing special about the other humans. And so you're just looking at humans who are worth or who the law will probably pay special attention to or give some protect in a way. And the first of such is a minor. So when you talk about a minor, okay, or sometimes called the infant, who are these people?
Minors are below 18 years.
Below 18 years.
Okay, so basically you guys, huh? Sindio. Oh, so now you're quiet, you're not talking, huh?
Sisi ni majority.
You guys are the minors you're talking about. Like,
No.
you can say no all you want, but Mr. Atu, let me just accept that no for now. So anybody who's below the age of the majority, right? So it's a minor. Now, the first thing you need to understand is the reason why we are discussing these people is not because there is anything special. In fact, minority can be a disability. Okay, that's the first thing. There are a lot of things that minors cannot do. But still, there are other things that they can do, which becomes an advantage as far as being a minor is concerned. Now, speaking of things that they can't do, or things that they can do, in the law of tort, we said minors can still be held liable under tort. Okay? Remember, when we're talking about torts, we did talk about something called capacity. And under capacity, we are looking at the criminal liability of most of these people. And the issue was, like I remember giving an example. So let's say a 5-year-old stabs another one with a knife. Who's going to be held responsible? Hmm?
No.
Oh,
The parent.
5-year-old.
Yeah.
The parent.
The
The
parent.
parent. What if they are 17?
Yeah,
The 17.
The 17-year-old. So the thing is, yes, minors are liable for their own thoughts, but sometimes we look at the age. Okay, the age of the minor becomes important in order for us to determine their criminal responsibility. Generally, just say if they're 8 years, they're going to be liable. But still, there are certain scenarios, like in that example of a 5-year-old stabbing another with a knife. The assumption is always that if it is a case in which there is some element of negligence, okay, a case in which there is some element of negligence, then we will go ahead and say, okay, depending on how old the minor is, the parent or the guardian may assume responsibility. Because if it is something that you expect a person who is, how do you define negligence? How do you define negligence? What is negligence? I mean, that was in thoughts.
Doing something that a reasonable person managed.
So the issue here is reasonable.
Reason.
Okay. So doing or not doing something. So it can be an act or an omission. So if it is a degree, if it is something that requires a degree of being reasonable, then the age of the minor or the infant comes into play, because people being reasonable, you know, like I remember having this conversation with this lady, and I think that was the last time we had the chat, because once you realize that someone is just saying stupid things, there's no point in talking with them anymore, because you're not learning anything, so you're just wasting your brain cells. So this lady was having an issue with like the husband or whatever it is. I mean, I could tell, I knew that. And they have a kid, so you're talking about the kid. And then the lady goes ahead and says, you know, I'm thankful that my kid is smart. At least that's something she inherited from me. And I was like, who told you that? And then the lady goes ahead and says, yeah, but you see, when a child is not smart, people say, huyu ni mjinga kama mamake. I was like, so to you, that is scientific. The fact that people use that as a matusi thing is scientific. The only thing you can say for sure that you inherited from your mom is mitochondria. That's pretty much the only. You guys remember mitochondria?
Yes.
Yeah, this is the only thing that will mostly come from the female. Will, in most cases, like rarely does it come from the male side of the body. So mostly it will come from the female. And so that was one. Like the other thing was, so I asked this lady, like, okay, so that's what you're thinking, but you went to school up to which stage, and did you even pass? So what makes you think you're smart? I mean, sometimes it's just luck, okay? So these are some of the things that come into play. Like you can have two properly stupid parents who end up having a smart child. So the kid is too smart for his age or her age. And that is a good thing and a bad thing. Because if that kid commits a crime, okay, like you have a child who is 9 years, but they are thinking like someone who is 15. So you see, this might look like a good thing, but if it is a crime, this 9-year-old is going to be treated as a 15-year-old. The same way you can have someone who's 17, but because of some problems, their mentality is that of someone who's 10 years. Again, and you see this with adults, like you just see it with grown-ups, and you can always tell. Just look at social media, okay? You can always find someone who's like properly old, but then their mindset is just retrogressive. It's like they're growing backwards. Of course, it doesn't help you once you hit 18. Okay, as far as the law is concerned, you're an adult, you're just going to be held liable, unless now the mental problem comes in, which is a different kind of thing. But for now, as far as minors are concerned, the age is going to be important in determining the criminal responsibility. You even see it in like some religion where they say if someone is, I don't know if it's 7 or 8, okay? Like for Christians, you have that story of like Jesus who ran out of his house at I don't know what age, and then he was found in the temple. What age was that? Yeah, so you guys
12.
didn't do CRE.
It was at 12 years.
So it was 12.
12 years.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you see,
12.
like I don't know whether me at Kasema 7, 8, or 9 or 10, I don't know. I just know it was something somewhere around that. So you see, that's the thing. What was the point? Because if that thing happens now, think about it. If it happens, what was the moral of that story? Have you ever read it and thought, what's the moral? Why are they telling us? So does that mean Jesus was just kichwa ngumu, like he wasn't a pay? Because there are two ways to read that story. One, the parents were negligent. They're not paying attention to their kid. That's one. Or two, this kid was just tough-headed. He wasn't paying attention to the parents. Okay? Or three, basically they're saying there is an age which if you get to, you're supposed to now start knowing what is right from what is right from what is wrong. So there is that. So it depends on what you want to read there. Okay, so if you think, yeah, well, you know, you should be running away and then going to church, you get eaten by mosquitoes in the church at night when no one's there. So that's the point. So all these cultures, all these religions, all these have an age where they say, okay, no, someone is supposed to be responsible. In Islam, I think for ladies at the age of 15, if you find those old school Islam, like the guys in Yemen or those fundamental Islamic countries, at this age, if you have a daughter, they're already married. It's so weird because, I mean, even if you try having a conversation with someone who's like 21, let me just push it all the way to like 24. Try having a conversation like marriage and future plan, and like it's like hitting your head against the wall. There is nothing. It's just going to be you saying things and nothing's going to come back. Because people at this age, what are they thinking of? I need to get a job. What do people think of when they're 24? It's like, I need to get a job. What else? 21 to 24, what's going on? Okay, I know you guys are like, you're 13. So just imagine. So what are they thinking of at this age?
Just 15.
What?
Party.
Just 15.
So there's
Sweet
party.
16.
There is how do I look in this picture? It's not even what do I look like. It's okay, this particular picture, how do I look like? Let me add filters. Okay. I need a job, but I'm not going to apply for one. Okay, like you apply for one and
I
then you're
need
like,
to go for vacation.
I need to move from this house. Nauna pesa.
yeah, and they don't have, you're like, when I get money, I'll move. Okay. Or, well, I need a boyfriend.
Soft life now.
I need a boyfriend. Why? Because my friend has one. And then you end up hooking up
Exactly.
you end up hooking up with some guy who, what one do or something, I don't know. It's just some mediocre character. So, all that. So now you can imagine other people being married at 15. And so that's why you see these are actually crime against children. Okay. So that if you try that in Kenya, you get arrested because that's a crime against these minors. Okay. So anyway, the other thing that minors are not going to do, they're not going to vote. Something. I don't even get why people are allowed to vote at 18, because what are you voting for? You should just say from now henceforth voting starts when you are 27 or something. When you have a job. Okay, so that you understand what it means to pay taxes. I mean, why would someone who's like 18-year-old, this guy is supposed to make a decision about the future of the country? What do they mean? They don't know. They just know that president has nice shoes. Okay. So anyway, but still, these are some of the disadvantages that comes with minority. But here's one that is interesting. Okay. Look at this. So an infant, or in this case, a minority, can own personal property. But that person cannot own immovable property. Yes, they can have their name registered, okay, as their owner. That's it. They can have their name entered there, but they can't sell it. Okay, first of all, when we talk about immovable property, what are we talking about? We did the law of property. What are these? Can you answer my questions before you guys start to go busy on WhatsApp or whatever it is? What is immovable property? Come on. Example? Property that cannot be moved. It's right there in the name. Let's see, what do you have?
Land.
See, land. Okay, houses. So what we're saying is that if, let's say, if someone has a kid, so this John here has a child, and then they say, you know, if I die, this property goes to X, and then they die, and X is like 15 years. So X will own that land, will own that house, and all that stuff, okay? But the ownership is not like 100% because by owning it just means that they'll have their name entered in the register as the owner, okay, of that land, but they can't sell that land. They cannot sell it. Okay, they can't even buy the land for starters. I mean, other than inheriting one, they can't buy, they can't sell. Because again, remember in the law of contract, there is a problem with contracting the minorities, or not minorities, but minors. Doesn't matter if you say minorities, it just means a different thing. But with minors, so that's the thing you have to know about minors. That's a problem. That is what we mean by minority, or in this case, minors, that being a disability. Any question? So these are most of these people end up losing on land because most parents will end up creating a trust. And then you put someone else in charge. You say, if my child is of this age, transfer this property to them. It would just be better off to just have the property entered under their name, but then they can't sell it. Okay. So with trust, someone can easily switch the land and then it's gone. Anyway, so that's the thing. That's the first thing with the natural persons, minors. Any question after that bit?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
Good.
Okay, let's say like it's a father that's about to die, and then he has like sons who are below the age of majority.
Why are you killing the father? Okay, may continue.
I'm talking from life experience.
You kill fathers
Okay,
in
so
reality. Okay,
no, it's not. It's
endelea.
something that happened.
Continue, I'm just joking.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
okay. So this father was about to die, and then he wanted to distribute the property.
Mm-hmm.
But you see, all of them, even the minors, got the land, and it's an immovable property. So why is it that, with the exception of this right, an infant cannot own immovable property? See, it's under the son. It's under his name, and he is only 5 years.
Well, here's the thing you have to understand. The law is full of contradictions. Okay? There is the law of succession, and then there is the law of persons. Now, under the law of persons, we just say who is entitled to your property. And then we say child or children, whether you are aware of the existence or not. You know, it's the same like wife. Since we are planning on killing husbands, so we'll just say wives. Because if it is the reverse, then it could be husband as well. So all these people. But then there's a difference between being entitled to something and actually owning that thing. Or let me put it in a way that is easier. There's a difference between possessing something and owning that thing. Okay, so if the father is distributing the land, the father will be like, okay, let my kids can have the land. So every child will have the land under their name. So now, technically they own it, but the ownership is in quotes, because if you own something, remember we said under the law of persons, you have the right to use, misuse, and dispose. So the problem is this minor, under disposing, selling something is an example of disposing. Can the 5-year-old sell that land if they want?
No.
No, they can't, right? So you see,
No.
now, so what is happening there is that the land is just under their name, in the sense that you can't come and claim it, because technically it belongs to that kid. But the kid can't sell it, can't do anything with it. So someone else is going to be controlling that land. So there's going to be some steward who's going to be controlling that land on behalf of that child. You see this thing with history, like if you pay attention to this history of kings and queens, most of these people, king, what was like a king in 8 years? Like there is this pharaoh from Egypt, Tatun, what is it? What's the full name? The boy king. What Tatun Ra or something. That name is always. But then the last one was just a kid. Okay, so like sometimes that was the case. He's like 8-year-old, and then they have all these. So someone else is just on the side. They are playing the steward. So that is what is happening there. So when you say ownership in this case, we mean owning it fully, in the sense that they can sell and all that stuff. Otherwise, what will happen is they'll just have their name, okay, under movable property. They'll just have their name entered in the register as the owner, but that's just as security, but they still can't do what other people can do with immovable property. Like they can't sell it. They can't even get on a contract, because in a contract for that. Any other question? So, Stacy?
No question.
So, do you have a question? So now, that's the thing, number one thing with minors. The other thing with minors, is a question? So the other thing with minors is the issue of legitimacy. Okay? So when you say a child is legitimate, you just mean that that kid is born out of a lawful marriage. Okay? So that's it. You know, the parents are lawfully married. Otherwise, they are illegitimate as far as the law is concerned. Okay? Meaning, if A and B are not married, but they are very active, and therefore they have a kid called C, then C becomes a legitimate child. Now, if these two get married, then C becomes a legitimate kid. In fact, the truth is most firstborns, okay? Most firstborns tend to be illegitimate. Most, not all. And I'm not hating on firstborns. I mean, I am a firstborn. So the thing usually is like two people meet, and then one person, usually the man, is just confused by the things like shape. Okay, so like these are stupid human beings are. Like the male creature will think, wow, I'm in love. Like, what are you in love with? She has a beautiful face, so that's just a shape, right? And she has a nice body. Again, that's just shape. So you just fallen in love with symmetry. I mean, it's like falling in love with the shape of your computer. And she smells nice, so your nose has just led you there. And the lady will be like, wow, she's nice. Why? Because he has a potential. Not really. Just based on what they've said. And then the next time, it's like you get a text, and the text is like, hey, pregnant. The person is paged. And then you say, well, I'm a Christian, I'm saved, and I'm a Muslim, and all that stuff. So let's get married. And then the first one is born. So yeah, jokes aside, that's just how the world works. So now the problem is, if you look at these, okay, like it's not a big deal, but then it becomes a big deal in certain situations. Legitimacy becomes a big deal in certain situations. Like, let me give you an example. Look at this example. So let's take this guy called John here. Okay, he was like a proper rich person. And by the way, I'm not saying that you guys should go and do when you do, what is it called? Harusi. I'm not saying that. Honestly, I don't care. Like, that's your problem. So I really don't care about that stuff. So so let's take this John. John is a properly rich person. And then John writes a will. Okay, and his will says, my land, this land will be passed to, like, let's say it's one of those old school types who believe in something called primogeniture. Okay, the primogeniture is just one of those old school type of like England and those places where land is being passed down to the firstborns of the family and all that. Like you look at some history and realize in that house, like kings, the next king is going to be probably the first son of that person, or in the case of Queen Elizabeth, whatever it is. So this John says that, okay, this land or this house will not be sold. It will always go to a legitimate, the legitimate heir is going to be the oldest, okay, child. Okay, so that could be the oldest boy or the oldest girl. Let's say it doesn't really matter. So that's the rule. And then John has this son called Mark and a daughter called Jen. So yeah, at this point, depending on who's older, it doesn't matter. So let's say who's old between Jen and Mark.
Mark.
Okay, let's say Mark is old. Good. So the property passes to Mark. Mark is the one who's in charge of that property, which means whatever money comes from it is the one who's like saying, okay, from now henceforth, 25% goes to this one, 10 goes to that, then the rest to Nagawana, me and my sister, whatever. He's the one who's in charge of the property. So that's fair. And then Jane goes ahead and gets married. Okay. Or forget about Jane. Let's just focus on Mark. So Mark has a kid because he's one of those people who, so he has a kid called X. Not married, just had a kid. And so this kid is like 12 years. And then Mark one day is like, okay, I don't think I want to die alone. So he meets this girl called Susan and they get married. And now they have a child, and that child is called Y. And now the child is like 2 years. This one is 12 years, this one is 2 years. So let's say Mark dies. Who inherits this property? Because Jane is there to enforce the wills. Like, according to this family, the property goes to the oldest legitimate child. So who's the oldest legitimate child in this scenario? Is it X or is it Y? Remember, X is 12 years, Y is 2. Yep. So biologically, this kid is old, but legally, Y is the oldest.
Legitimate.
Yeah. Because if they have another kid, so Z, who's like 1 year, so it will go to Y. And if Y is dead, this guy is still just going to be uko kwa dirisha, it will go to Z. Okay. So that's the reason why the issue of legitimacy is a big deal in the law of persons, because it structures who is identified as who. Okay. So if, on the other hand, if those two get married, like is another thing, is like another way to look at these. So normally what happens is that when these people who had illegitimate kids, sometimes they get married and those kids become legitimate, okay, because now they belong to both of these, you know. So that's the thing. But that, again, that's just complicated because sometimes one of the parents is like, I want nothing to do with this kid. I mean, it sort of works that way. This whole thing of stepfather, stepmother, it only works in movies and in motivational speakers and in Facebook comment section. That is why it works. Let me repeat that. This whole thing of step whatever works in movies, okay? Or when somebody's giving you a motivational talk, when they're like, you know, when my Stuart Watch died, and then my parent married, and my step whatever was very supportive. That's motivational talk. Or when somebody puts a funny meme, and then in the comment section, there's always going to be that one person who says, no, like for me, I was raised by a step parent and it turned out okay. You think. So the truth is human beings are not necessarily, especially men. Men aren't designed to take care of other men's kids. You really have to. You might think, no, I'm okay with it. No, you're not. You've just trained yourself to think you're okay with it. That's the reason why a man will probably forgive a woman who misuses his money, but infidelity, nope. Unless that guy is just, well, unless their masculine level is very low, like their XY. So the Y chromosome, basically their testosterone is very low. Most men will not forgive infidelity. And if they forgive, they haven't forgiven. They've just figured out that it's sad for them to get another girlfriend. So let me just continue hanging with this one, get the free benefits of having a girlfriend, but deep down I know I'm never going to trust her. That is why the leading cause of death, as far as females are concerned, will be the man in your life. So anyway, what's my point? My point here is, so there are scenarios where just gone from law to evolutionary biology. That is, how did we get there? So the point is, according to, again, the issue of illegitimacy. So once, now you understand why it's important, but once that kid, okay, like in this case we're talking about C, becomes legitimate, then now they have a right to contest intestate. Intestate means somebody died with no will, okay? So Millicent, remember the example you gave? In that case, you're talking about a man who was structuring his will. But what if that father, died and there was no will in place? Then we'll say the man died intestate, no will. So if there is no will, then sometimes the distribution of property will resort to those kienyeji. How do you call traditional in Kiswahili? It's not kienyeji, there is a word. Like I've never really cared much for Kiswahili. Kitamaduni. Oh, kienyeji. So kitamaduni, like those, if you're going with those kitamaduni way of distributing land, then somebody might say, well, those kids that you recognize will take first priority. The one that you don't recognize sometimes is even kicked out. They're like, huyo alikuwa mtoto wa nje, I think. So you see, that can be an issue. Of course, according to the law, according to the law of succession, yes, the child still has a right to claim something. But the problem is the degree to which you can claim or how much you can claim will depend on whether you are legitimate or illegitimate. Okay. And so that's the thing. So these are some of the rights that the legitimacy thing will create for the kid. Any question? So any question? So ladies, don't have illegitimate kids. And gentlemen. Or just have them and then make sure you're very rich and you sorted them. As Elon says, have many kids. In case?
In case you find one who is illegitimate, always go for a way that you can make them legitimate by getting married to that person. But I advise no, don't.
Yeah, well, again, these things, they do happen. The world is weird that way. Nowadays, there are things which are easier said than done. I mean, no one plans for that. Well, some people do because they're just careless. But for the most part, if it has happened, it has happened. But the cool part is, you see, the law of persons, okay, and the law of succession. So the law of succession will supersede the law of persons. But the problem is the degree to which it will, okay? Because yes, the kid can still claim, but the problem is how much can they claim, okay? That becomes an issue. Also, it depends. I mean, like, let's say, here's what I usually say. Let's say, again, speaking of legitimacy. So if I have a child, let's call this child X here. And then probably, because women do this. So the woman goes away with the kid, and then they say, this man will never see this kid, because somehow you think that's not a game that anybody wins. And I usually laugh when ladies do that. So like, that man will never see that kid. It's like, really, you think the man is going to lose, and you think the woman has won. The truth is, no one is winning in this game. We only have a kid who's becoming the loser, because it doesn't matter how hard you finance this kid's life. It's the same as a man raising a kid alone. It doesn't matter how hard you do it. There's always going to be something missing in that kid's life. Okay, that's why you need a man and a female as far as it's concerned. No, but ignoring that, ignoring the sociology behind it. So if this guy ends up getting married to this other lady, okay, and then they have kids, okay, maybe they have 3 kids, then you realize that in terms of distribution of wealth, this guy is going to focus a lot on this. Now, while this one may show up, like Return of the King, Lord of the Rings, whatever it is, show up, it will be like, okay, so now you've shown up, now what? So, well, I'm entitled to that property. The problem is, most of these men will not even wait. Like a guy who knows that he has a screwed up background will not wait until they're dead. They will sort these things while they're still, if they're wise. You'll notice this is a guy who will have a business, and then he'll be like, you, kid number 1, I want you to be the director of this company. And you, I want you to be running this real estate. And by the time you notice, all that wealth is held under company, and these kids are directors. And so personally, the man has nothing under their name. So these are the billionaires. They have nothing under their name. Everything is under company. So this one who shows up later, okay, after having been brainwashed by the other parent who went away, you show up there just a bitter person, and you still lose. Now, that is the dark side of it. Of course, the bright side is maybe they're smart and things work out. So the law kind of, at this point, the law is not just going to say, okay, they're your child and they're entitled to something. The problem is what thing? Well, something under your name. And what is that? Maybe it's like the 30,000 that is in the bank account. So distribute that one 4 ways. So yeah, so some of these games are not games you play if you want to. Like, there are games you don't play if you think you're going to step out. Marriage is one of them. If you think there is a chance that you might leave that marriage, don't even bother getting into it. Remain single. So, because especially if kids are involved. But people say, yeah, well, if it gets to a point where it's too bad, the signs were there that it was ever going to be bad. So anyway, moving on to the next thing, adoption. So what do we know so far? Natural persons, we are focusing on minors, and we've talked about issues to do with the legitimacy of the minor, and now we're talking about adoption. Now, when we talk about adoption, what is happening in this case? Because adoption is different from, say, something like guardianship. So with adoption, we're just saying we are transferring parental rights, okay, to someone who isn't biologically the parent of that child. Okay, and so actually, once the kid is adopted, then the relationship is just similar to that one of the parent and the child. And sometimes it's even worse because while your kid might come home and then you're like, I'm hungry, and then you say, I don't have food. Can you just take that hot water and then put some drinking chocolate and then drink and hopefully look for like 2 slices of bread and then go to bed. You'll know about food tomorrow. With the adopted kid, the law might be say, one of those social service workers might say you are mistreating this kid, okay, because they are not biologically yours. This is again one of those dilemmas that step parents will have. Because with their biological kid, they can do something wrong and then you punish them. With a kid who isn't biologically yours, the danger is always that, in as much as they need to be punished, okay, somebody will say you're just being mean because that kid isn't biologically yours. So those are some of the challenges, the flip side to this. Okay, but the truth is, yeah, sometimes it's better, some kids have a better chance of becoming someone because they were adopted. I mean, otherwise they would have just been street kids. So that's the thing with adoption. Any question? Of course, there are rules regarding this, which I'm not really going to get into, like the age difference and all that stuff. Any question? Okay, so if you're talking about kids, you guys are not asking questions, and you pretended that we are adults. You see, you don't know what to ask because, yeah. So anyway, I hope we are together. So Stacy and Vincent.
Yes.
All right. Now, the other one is now guardianship. What is the difference between adoption and guardianship?
Okay, let me try. For
Yeah.
adoption, you take someone's child, and you make them, you make them to be your own child. And
Legally.
then for guardianship is whereby it's not mandatory for them to be your own child, but you can act like taking care of them, for example, paying for their fees, providing for them basic needs, but they are not yours under legal action.
So yeah, so in this case, you're just playing the parental role to a child who's not really a child. So in this case, you're just a guardian and they are your ward. Okay, so the kid is your ward. So they're under your protection. So like sometimes a father is dead, okay, and the mother is going to be deemed as the guardian. Okay, and I'm thinking, wait, but the mother is already there. Well, it depends. What if it was a stepmother? Yeah, or the mother is dead, and then the father is like, I'm going to be a guardian because maybe you're the stepfather. And or an uncle or something along those lines. So someone takes the responsibility to shape that kid. So according to the African customary laws and all that stuff, there's a way you kind of deal with these things. Okay. But since nowadays we no longer live in those nuclear community where people knew their uncles and aunts. Nowadays, you only know your caretaker and the security guard and the guy who brings you gas and the M-Pesa person. So, which means most children will be born and then their parents probably die and they have no clue what to do. So, in this case, if that happens, I mean, you're not even related to the kid, and then you say, look, I'm not adopting this kid. I'm just going to play the role of the guardian, okay? And then you make it official. So it's like, the way in religion, I think Catholic or something, where there was that Godfather, okay? The Godfather thing. I'm not over the Godfather movie, but Godfather, like, this is my father, that's my Godfather. And then Godfather is supposed to be sort of the people who will advise you, even help you get a job. So they're playing that guardian role. So again, this helps with as far as the law of persons is concerned. So if that person has no parental, and this is important, forgetting about the law, I mean, think of it from psychology and even development perspective. Like look at it this way. Most men who grow up without masculine role models, okay? I just want to say most men who grew up with a single mom, most of these men, I'm talking about men because I'm a man, most of these men have a high chance of ending up in prison. They have a high chance of becoming alcoholic. Basically, most of them just have a high chance of being attracted to vices. And for the most part, their marriages don't even work. Of course, there are few who are going to be successful. Okay. Why? Because, well, there's only so much that your mom can tell. In fact, past the age of 5, there really isn't much that they're going to. In fact, is how it is. If a boy is as tall as the mother, irrespective of the age, if they're of the same height, usually that is when the guy starts having a big head or a tough headed. Now, with female, not really. Like I don't really know much about female struggles, but here's the thing. What I know is that most women who also grow up with their dads without the mother tend to be very masculine. And the problem with that is that they end up having a hard time again dating. Okay. So I mean they can date, they'll have a hard time in marriages. Dating is just what do people do in dating? Just eat and you eat and then you talk. So that's the thing. So sometimes guardianship will come in. Although in this case, you're looking at it from a legal point of view, but from a psychological point of view, it's something else. So that's the thing with, again, minors. So minors, we've talked about issue of adoption, talked about issue of legitimacy, we've talked about issue of what? Guardianship. Now, the other person that you are interested in under artificial persons is crazy people, which is not a legal term. So mentally disordered persons or persons of unsound mind. They are protected by law. And the reason why they are protected is because, well, they may have certain rights, like they still have a right to live, but some of the things that they can't do, which other people can do. For example, they don't have a right to vote. They're of unsound minority. What exactly are they going to vote? They can't get married legally because you can't contract. And remember, we said marriage is a contract. So if you can't sign the contract of marriage, in fact, you can't sign any contract because you're of unsound mind, it means you're not getting into that thing willingly. Someone is taking advantage of the person. Okay. But the good thing is they can use that insanity as a defense, but that is only if they can approve, if it can be proven that they didn't know what they were doing when they were doing it. Okay. Of course, they can't contract as well. So yes, insane people have rights, but they also have disadvantages regarding issues like that. Question? Any question?
Okay, I have a question. I have a question. Like, let's say these mentally disordered people, like the ones that are in the rehabilitation centers, see, they are not that completely insane or whatever. See, they can still vote, or
Now,
it's not allowed.
There's a difference between mental disorder that stops you from voting and a clinically diagnosed mental disease. Okay. Like, remember the former governor of Nairobi, Sonko, when he was being accused of having stolen 300 and something million, I think it was like 600 and something million. And one of the things that his lawyer said, that the guy is insane. That was one of the defense they were trying to use when they realized things are not actually working out. Remember, he even had to go to the hospital, like when he was in what is it called, remand. And then the next thing is like, I have chest problem, blah blah blah, and then he went to the hospital. I mean, I'm sure he wasn't sick. And then the lawyer was like, so it means all it takes is that for a doctor to declare you clinically insane, and that's it. And then that becomes a defense. So for those people who are in rehab means a lot of things. You can be in rehab because you've been using drugs. You can be in rehab because you've been an alcoholic. Okay? If you are of unsound mind, you don't go to rehab. Where do you go? Well, a sanitarium. Okay? Anyway, call it a rehab, but it really isn't a rehab. Just go to the hospital for sick people. What is that? Akina Madare and all that stuff. There's a name. There's a way they call it. Okay, can't remember the name. So yeah, those guys are going to vote. What are they voting? Now, when they get well, then they can vote. Is that okay?
Yes.
And remember, there are a lot of things
Yes.
that can make a person insane, like especially like women. Do you know that there are cases where a woman will have a child, okay? They've just given birth to a child. They've spent 9 months carrying that kid and even coming up with names. And then they give birth to that child, and then they're given their child, and then they're like, I'm not holding this kid. I won't even feed it. And then usually, because there's that can happen, especially if you hang around cats. Okay, I mean, I love cats. I'm not a big fan of dogs, but I love cats. So, like pregnant people hanging around cats, there is a, what is it called? It's another. There are some. Is it a virus or something? Some disease. It has a long name. I can't remember the name, but like the cat stool, like those feces or whatever, that can transfer that to like a pregnant lady, depending on the type of like the sanitation, and it can make them insane. Okay, so or like you've seen those, or even someone who has a child and maybe then they realize that their husband was cheating. Okay, and then you've just had a kid with this man, and they're like, really? And they want nothing. So they hate the man, and then they vent that out through the kid. So the thing is, insanity is there. It's just a question of, is it clinically diagnosed or not? So once it's clinically diagnosed, that can become a defense, among other things. Right. So again, the law of persons. The other thing is provision for marriage. This one is fairly straightforward. The idea is marriage, that becomes a status. And so that is the reason why you're going to be defined as single or married. Okay? Mr., Mrs. I mean, for men, for men, it's not that complicated, just Mr. For women, you have Miss, Mrs., and I don't even know, so, all that. So as far as marriage is concerned, under the law of persons, there's going to be name 4 types of marriage recognized by the law. Well, statutory marriage, customary marriage, Hindu, and Islamic marriage. So these are things you need to know. Okay. And as far as the Kenyan law is concerned, marriage is between man and a woman. So if you want your woman and woman, man and man, good luck with that. But it won't fall anywhere under the constitution. So you'll have to move to Canada or US or whatever. So there is that. Now, any question up to there? Again, I'm just rushing through these things. And then one more thing that you need to know before we jump into something totally different is citizenship, nationality. And here, one, there is the question of how do you become a citizen? Birth registration, of course, Kitambo, there was like birth, naturalization, what was the other one? I can't even remember the other one. But now it's just because people who were born in Kenya before 1963, those are not kids, so they're dying. Okay? So that's why it doesn't even matter anymore. So now it's just either you're born here or you've registered to be a citizen, and then you become a citizen. Okay. And there is also the issue of where you live. Okay, is there any question up to that? Any question? So all this is still under natural persons. And then there is the question of where you live. You see, it's important. There's a difference between where you are born and where you currently live. So where you live will determine a number of things, including taxes. And that is why it's called domicile. So where do you live? That becomes domicile. Now, if it is a domicile of origin, that's pretty much where you're born. But then if you choose to live in Uganda, but you're a Kenyan, that becomes a domicile of choice, which means you're going to be paying taxes in Uganda as a foreigner. Okay? So choice versus origin, two different things. But then there is also the domicile of dependence. Like in case of like those, you find a man dating a woman who lives in I don't know, let's say US. Well, the reverse can also be true. Now, in this case, the man's domicile of dependence, if they move to US, so now that becomes that one. If they're married, so this man acquires a citizenship by virtue of marriage to someone who's already a citizen there. And the reverse is also true. So in Kenya, so they can acquire Kenyan citizenship if these are Kenyan and then they move to Kenya. So they become a Kenyan by virtue of marriage. So, but that or no, that becomes nationality. But nationality aside, domicile is just a question of where do you live. And most people, once you start making money, you realize that you can like this is a funny thing. Facebook, when it was starting, Zuckerberg had a friend called Eduardo Saverin. So this guy invested $15,000 in Facebook through Zuck because they are friends. Of course, at some point, that money grew to something. I think it was like 10 billion at some point. That's how much this guy was worth. And then he realized, okay, I was like, why should I be paying? I don't want to pay tax in US anymore. So the guy moved, I don't know, I think he moved to Ecuador or something, moved to some country, and then decided that he's no longer a citizen of US. And by then, the IRS is an equivalent of KRA, the US, didn't have time to take some of the money. So he moved with all the money and didn't pay tax. So that meant that the country ended up changing rules. So there's actually the Eduardo Sovereign rule, which says if you're a US citizen and you make money and you want to switch, okay, your domicile of choice, you want to turn it into your country, so you want to be a citizen of that country, you will not allow that until you clear your taxes here, and then you can go away. Because that's what rich people do. Okay, they're not tied down to one country. They'll find another country and just go and live there. Or they start a business in that country and then ensure that the head office is there. So they can come back to their domicile of origin, but the company is in the domicile of choice. So this is the thing about the law of persons. Any question? We are done with the natural persons. Any question before we quickly look at artificial persons? Lucy? Innocent? Any question?
No.
All right. So the last thing is the artificial persons. And here, this is just, in this case, we're talking about companies. And the first thing you need to understand is that when it comes to artificial persons, these are persons created by law. And so we have corporations, which are companies, and a company is a person. This is one of those decisions that was arrived at in Solomon v. Solomon. The idea here was, there was a guy called Solomon, and he had 5 kids. So Solomon owned a leather merchant shop, which he converted into a company. So in that company, Solomon himself had 20,001 shares. And then his 5 children had a share each. So each kid 1 share, 1 share. His wife also had 1 share. So in total, the company had 20,007 shares. Okay, that's how it was. Now, when the company ended up, so Solomon, in business, you take out some debts. So he took out some debentures. Debenture is an equivalent of a bond, so a loan. And things didn't go well. So things started going poorly. And so this guy decided that all the money that was in the company account he took that money and paid himself. Because remember, he also had some denies. So he paid himself, and there was nothing left to pay creditors, or in this case, these debenture holders. And then these guys went to court. Okay, so they went to court, and they accused Solomon. They said, look, you, okay, Solomon, should not have paid yourself first. You should have paid us. And then, since you're the creditors, you're the debenture holders, and then whatever money is left, you pay yourself because you are the one who owns the company. Now, do you think these guys were right? Should this Solomon have paid these debts and then whatever was left paid himself, or it was just okay for him to pay himself first? What do you think? Stacy, Vincent, so what do you think?
The question.
Hmm?
The question, please.
The question is, should Solomon have paid himself first, or he should have paid the creditors?
Creditors.
Well, that is how it looked like. But then the problem was, okay, it was a question of who owned you money. Was it Mr. Solomon, or was it the company, Solomon and Company Limited? So there's a difference, okay? Who owned the money? Was it the company, or it was this guy?
The company.
The company. So if it was the company, and that company also owned Solomon money. So the judge's conclusion was a corporation as an artificial person. That company is different. Okay? A company is different from people who own it. So a corporation is a person. Okay? This is a person. Which person? It's an artificial person. That is the reason why under an incorporated association, you have things like sole proprietors, and you have things like partnerships, which by there I'll send you those notes, you need to read them. So a partnership and a sole proprietor, these are businesses where the owner and the business are the same thing. So you don't really get some protection. Like if you owe money, okay? So if John here has a shop, and that shop is a sole proprietor, and so John has 50,000 in debts, and the shop has a stock of 100,000. Then auctioneers will just come and take this stock and sell it and then pay themselves. Why? Because John and the shop are the same thing. But if John has a shop, but that shop is registered as a company under, it's ABC Limited, and ABC Limited has a shop, and John just happens to be working there, then you see John and this company are totally different. So you get my point here. And that is why we started with that example. In the first example, as I said, if a guy called John, who has 30 million in account, okay, gets into debt with a company called ABC, then ABC can go to court and say, of this 30 million, pay us our 15 million. But then if the reverse is, or rather, if John's structure is wealth in such a way that he has a company called 123, and that company has 30 million, he himself only has 20,000 in account, but then he's managed to take a loan of, say, 12 million, because these people assume that since he owns this company, he can pay. Maybe he somehow misrepresented the truth, so it doesn't matter. Then when these people go to court, the question will be, who owes you money? Is it John, or is it 123 Limited? If the answer is John, then John only has 20,000, and therefore he is bankrupt. So we'll say John is bankrupt. I mean, Trump did this. Most of these billionaires have done that. So they'll not pay that debt, but their company will still continue to exist. And if this company has a debt, then they'll start another company. And that's it. So usually that's a good thing. That's one of the powers of an artificial person that you really need to know. You can have as many companies as you want, and if one fails, it's okay, shut it down, start another. And that failure doesn't follow you. I mean, it will be bad for your reputation when people say, this guy is always starting companies that are failing. But you see, once you can go past the ego, then you're good. So that's the thing. Now, the other thing we need to know about these corporations is that we have a corporation sole and a corporation aggregate. Meaning a corporation sole, and you need to pay attention here, is the kind of an artificial person, okay, where only one person can hold office at any given moment. For example, office of the president, which is an example of. So there's a difference between Mr. President, there's a difference between Ruto and office of the president. Ruto is the human being part of the president, is the natural person, is the president. But then the office of the president is another person, it's a different person, it's a corporate soul. Meaning, even if Ruto decides to take a leave or he decides to do his traveling, then it doesn't mean that now that he's out of the country, nothing can happen. If there is a letter being addressed to the office of the president, that letter will go there. Whoever is responsible for doing whatever is going to be done will stamp the letter and things will proceed as always. Unless it's something that has to be done with the natural person, the president, the Mr. President. So there's a difference between that. Now, a corporation aggregate is where we have more than one person holding office. For example, the board of directors in a company. So you can have, 2 board of directors. You can have 10 board of directors. Okay? But you can't have 2 presidents in the office of the president. All right. Any question up to that part? Any question?
No question.
Okay, so I will give it a break there. So that's the law of persons. Remember, the whole point here under the law of persons was simply to try and understand. First of all, we are required to know that as far as persons are concerned, we're talking about a person. We're talking about an entity. Okay, so this is an entity that is recognized by law. And that can be natural, okay, e.g. the human being, that's a natural person, or it can be artificial. So Safaricom is an example of an artificial person. So you contract with Safaricom, which means Safaricom can sue you, you can sue Safaricom. Safaricom can own property. So most of these will just come down to the consequences of incorporation. So an artificial person is created by incorporation. That is the process of turning like a business into a company. You incorporate. And once it has been incorporated, which means, how does that work? So how do you create a company? Registration is one of them. You can register the company with the registrar of companies. Okay. Act of the parliament, for example, parastatals are created by the parliament, or through a charter, like universities or charter. Universities and banks are created by a charter. Once it has been incorporated, it will have certain rights, like owning property, being sued, and all that. But then there is a limitation, because you don't want to confuse artificial persons and natural persons. There is a limitation. For example, natural persons are going to be protected by the Bill of Rights. Okay? You have a right to live. A company doesn't have a right to live. You can start a company and end it anytime you feel like. You can vote as a natural person. Company, which is a person, can't vote. You, which is not a right anyway, can commit a crime. Companies can only commit a civil wrong, because companies are not capable of motive. So the human beings behind the crime, which is supposed to be committed by a company, which the company has already committed. Those human beings are the ones that are going to be held accountable. So unless somebody has a question, we can leave it there. That's the end of that topic. Any question? Any question? Yeah, are you guys there?
Question? Yes.
Okay, so you remind me to send you the flow of persons and partnership notes, because partnership is an example of an incorporated person. Other than that, have a lovely evening. That's pretty much the end of that. So see you in the next class.
Thank you.